Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishabhai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavatam Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandathami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini. Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Fullara Vindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamayah Pradipah Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Rudaduhe Namaha. Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyah Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So welcome everyone to this 16th session of Bhagavad Gita. We are doing the Sankhya Yoga. And just like I started last time, just a little bit of, for us to get warmed up, I have a quiz, and we will see how we all do. So question number 1, so far, what are the different names of Sri Krishna that we have encountered?
Rishikesha.
Rishikesha, wow. You chose a very...
Madhusudana.
Madhusudana, very good. Any other names?
Keshava.
Which one?
Keshava.
Keshava, yes. Keshava, yes. And also one
Madhava.
more. Madhava, yes. Madhava. And also there was one more in chapter 1. Which one was that? I'm trying to remember, in shloka number 20 or something. Just before that, a very nice name. It just suddenly escaped from my mind here. But
Gudakesa.
Gudakesha. It's for Arjuna. It's for Arjuna. It is coming up, Auntie. It's coming up. Rishikesha, yes, they mentioned it already. Yes, very good. Very good. What is it? Very nice name. I guess it will come to me. Okay. Another name which we recently encountered in chapter 2 is Govinda. Govinda, yeah. Okay, so now, Auntie, you can see the names of Arjuna.
Gudakesha.
Gudakesha. Yes. Any other names?
Kaunteya.
Kaunteya. Yes. I think somewhere somebody's sound.
Dhananjaya.
Correct. Dhananjaya, yes. That is very good. That is very good. Yeah.
Tablet should mute.
Somebody should mute it. I don't know whose it is. Okay. I'm not able to see. Okay, so now question number 3. What was the word for the wise person in shloka number 11? The word was panditaha. Panditaha. And the word pandita, again, the etymology for this was panda, with keeping the word panda, indicating the man who knows the highest knowledge. So panditaha, from that point, he is the wisest man. On the same lines, does anybody remember what was the word for the wise man in Shloka 13 and 15? It was dhiraha. Dhiraha. A person with high level of endurance. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara praptihi dhirastatrana muhyati. That one, and even
Purushar Shabaha.
Purushar Shabaha is the name for Arjuna.
No, noble person. Okay.
Yeah, he was the name for, correct. He was a noble and the great among, Purusha among Rishabha, correct. Very good. Okay, how about the name of, how about some of the pair of opposites mentioned in Shloka 14?
Sukha Dukha.
Sukha Dukha, very good.
Heat and cold.
Heat and cold, very good. Very good.
Shitoshna.
Shitoshna, which is heat and cold. Yeah, and correct. Those are the only two pairs of opposites. Of course, there's another one, Mana Pamana Yoho, that comes in a different Gita shloka, but it can be used in this context as well. Excellent. I hope this is a good warm-up. Okay. So last week, we finished with this shloka, chapter number 15, and we saw how Sri Krishna is advising Arjuna that when one faces this Shita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukha, pain and pleasure with titiksha, right? With titiksha or calm endurance, then such a person is fit for that highest knowledge. And that is what is mentioned here, Saha Amritatvaya Kalpate, which means that such a person has the equanimity to face all situations which comes to him, whether it is Shita Ushnas at the body level or at the mind level, which is joy and sorrow, or even at the intellect level, which is this honor, criticism, mana pamana yoho, which I mentioned earlier. So what does that get us? What happens if I develop that ability to withstand all this criticism, joy and sorrow and all that, which for us, I mean, we go through that in different ways, right? I mean, somebody says something and I get upset about it, or somebody praises me and I feel so cool. So we go through this all the time. And in other situations, whether it is trying to working hard for a promotion and something that doesn't come my way and everything. So in all these cases, we recognize that if I'm able to withstand that kind of pain, and even, I guess, for some of us who got the COVID shot, if you're able to withstand the pain of the pinprick, I guess, ultimately, it is only just pinpricks, right? But it prepares us for something which is higher. For example, when we say that if for whatever reason, my working hard towards a promotion and it didn't come through, we console ourselves that perhaps this is meant for something better. Maybe this is good for me because there is something else which is waiting for me, right? So to here, this endurance actually leads me to a higher goal. And that higher goal is the Amritattva, which is mentioned here, or Amritattva meaning immortality. What is immortality? Which is that which is beyond my mortal self, right? Mortal indicating it is finite, whereas immortal is something which is infinite. So this is one of the basic qualifications in order to get to the higher state of moksha. the problem for us is that we swing between all these simple joys and sorrows, and we don't recognize that there is something even beyond. But in order to recognize that which is beyond, I should be able to go through these small pinpricks in our life. And simple examples, if I take, for example, traffic, we said, or the weather. In all these cases, I cannot just escape from it. Even as much as during these COVID days, it's nice to just sit at home and work and not worry about the traffic or anything. But even sitting at home, there might be other things which can come and disturb me. And the question for me is, these kind of disturbances at the body, mind, and intellect will always be there. And I need to rise above that. So that's what the shloka was trying to say. But the shloka is also trying to say that in this world, which is constantly changing, of various ways in which relationships, for example, today I may have some friends, who knows tomorrow whether the same friends will be there. Today I have certain set of my relatives. In the future, will I still continue to have my relatives with me? This is in relationships, but what about objects? What about the objects that we are surrounded ourselves from the time when I was a child to a middle-aged person to where I am today? All these objects are constantly changing. So in this changing world, where we find that changes are ahead, which is just to remind us that changes are always happening. And in this instance too, they're all coming and going, agama and apayinaha. So I should maintain that endurance and recognize that these finite objects are only ever changing. So in this flood of time, where incidents, circumstances, and environments, they flow into the present from somewhere, we never know when our prarabdha karma comes to give us results here, right? So when this happens, so Lord Krishna is trying to tell us, and as this very famous saying goes, is that in all these things, they're all impermanent and they're all anitya, and they're all anitya. And so we should have an attitude of this too shall pass away. So this too shall pass away. So the formula for life, which this shloka is leading on to the next one, is there are only two things. And that is, one of them is the impermanent or anitya, which is all this world of objects, relationships, situations. All this is impermanent. And the only thing that is nitya is that atma, or that consciousness. So the impermanent comes and goes, but that atma, which is the permanent, is the one which witnesses the coming and going. So hold on to that consciousness, which is nitya or eternal, and then live on in this realm of change. So this is the secret for leading a happy life. And this, if I understand this simple principle, which is coming out of the shloka, then I can always have this cheerful attitude in this world. And in many ways, if you think about it, knowingly or unknowingly, we actually do this. A simple example is when I'm watching a movie in a theater. In the movie, there may be all the things, anything can be going on. You know, there might be a big tragedy, there's a huge comedy, and there might be a huge flood, a tsunami, if you will. The water might just seem to come out of on the screen. But we know in all this that it is just happening on the movie. it's not wetting the screen at all. So too, if I'm able to recognize the same thing, that even as I'm going through this world, all these happenings are nothing but like the movie, then I can have this titiksha or this endurance that is being talked about. Other examples is in the same movie or in a drama, for example, we have Shah Rukh Khan, acting like a beggar. Now, when he comes out of that role, he, of course, cannot be the same beggar when he goes to his house, right? So all these examples are just giving us this idea of the impermanence of life. And if I can use that same examples and do some mananam on it and see how even within our own life, all these things which are changing are impermanent. So looking at this, how can I still focus on who am I, and that I who am the Atma, and recognizing this whole play of situations and everything which is happening on that substratum is constantly changing, then that really allows me to be a candidate fit for the highest knowledge. And this is what Lord Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna from this shloka. So having talked about this anitya, or the impermanence, or this constant changing, and the nitya, which is eternal, Lord Krishna feels that now he has to take Arjuna to a little more higher level. And that is, he wants to now show about how that even as I think that this world is changing and is not permanent, guess what? That is also not even there. It is actually unreal. And so we will see what is he meaning by this division of what is real and unreal. So this is a very famous shloka. It encompasses literally the entire message of the Upanishads. And so we will chant this. Nasato vidyate bhavaha. Nasato vidyate bhavaha. Na bhavo vidyate sataha. Na bhavo vidyate sataha. Ubhayorapi drishtontaha. Ubhayorapi drishtontaha. Tvanayostattvadarshibhihi. Tvanayostattvadarshibhihi. Nasato vidyate bhavaha. Na bhavo vidyate sataha. Ubhayorapi drishtontaha. Tvanayostattvadarshibhihi. So very powerful shloka. One of the deepest shlokas of Bhagavad Gita. In fact, we can say the deepest. And certainly this needs a lot of mananam, lot of chintanam on every word of this. And we will see how we can take this sort of slowly and understand it properly. It may take one or two things. We will see how it goes. So the first thing, asat bhavaha na vidyate. Asat bhavaha na vidyate. So what is that? That is asataha, of the unreal. Bhavaha, existence is not there. Okay. I hope you're able to listen to me. Can you hear me? I see the video.
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. So asat bhavaha na vidyate. is the first statement here. So asataha indicating of the unreal, bhavaha, okay, that is existence is not there. So that means unreal does not exist. Na vidyate is not there. So unreal does not exist. So that is the first statement here. The second one he's saying is sataha abhavaha na vidyate. Sataha, which is the real. So earlier we said asataha indicating the non-real or the not real. But here we are saying sataha, which is the real. So sataha abhavaha. Abhavaha indicating the non-existence. So sataha abhavaha, non-existence is not there. Na vidyate. Okay. So which means, putting the two sentences together now, of the unreal, there is no non-existence. For the real, there is no non-existence. Of the unreal, there is non-existence, sorry. But for the real, there is no non-existence. So that means what? That means it is the real which is always existing, whereas the unreal, it never exists. Okay. And this for the tattva darshibihi. Now, this is the third important word to indicate the wise man. Tattva darshibihi. Tattva indicating the truth. Tattva means the truth. Darsha meaning the seer. Darshibihi. So tattva darshibihi, for the seers of the truth. For those anayoho. So anayoho, but for them, they are able to recognize the difference between the two. Anayoho darshibihi tattva. Anayoho tattva darshibihi. For the knowers of the truth, they know exactly what is unreal and what is real. So that is, in a sense, what the shloka is trying to say. It sounds very deep. It sounds very difficult to understand. So we will try to see how we can understand this even more. So whenever we say, earlier, like we said, Bhagavan had talked about what is eternal and the non-eternal. So whenever we say something is, say, impermanent or anitya, we are essentially trying to give some reality to it, right? Indicating that, well, like we talked about the heat, the cold, the joy and the sorrow, right? At least for a small second, that did stay there. So we actually gave a little bit of reality to it, right? So for a short time, it was actually real. So, but when we say it is unreal, so it means that which did not exist, neither in the past or that. So let's look at it the other way. A real is defined in Shastras as that which exists in the past, that which exists in the present, and that which exists in the future. So in that context, now if you look at this heat, cold, or joy, pleasure that we experienced that only now. We did not experience this before. We did not experience it. We will not experience this in the future for that particular experience. So in that sense, now you would call this as unreal. So it was not there in the before. It will not be there in the future. And it is just there for a short while in the present. Another example to discuss about unreal, which probably might drive home the truth even more, is an example of how I would see a snake on a rope. Imagine it's just twilight time and you happen to come out of your garage and you just stepped your foot on something which was very slimy, or immediately you kind of recoiled back. You put your leg back at the back, and because in your mind it was like, oh my God, did I touch on something which is a snake? And then you kind of catch yourself, and you think, okay, wait a minute, there cannot be a snake in this. I've never seen a snake in this grass. How can that be? So when the knowledge dawns on you, immediately you recognize that what we stepped on it was probably just a garden hose, right? So, but for that second, it was very real to us. So this would constitute, as per the shloka now here, it was unreal. That snake was not a real thing at all. It just you happened to feel it at that moment. So this is what we call as unreal. So, but then in that realm, now we can recognize how all these experiences that we go through are in the realm of the unreal. But that which exists all the time is this aspect of this Atma, which was always there before, which is here now, and which will be there in the future too, and which is not going to disappear from any of my experiences. So it is that changeless substratum on which a lot of these experiences, they come and go. They agama painaha. So they come and go. So Tattvadarshi is that person who has recognized this aspect of not just the impermanent part of it, but the fact that this experience itself is unreal. And so he is the person who really knows that aspect of the truth. But for all of us who are sadhakas, even if we can get to the level of understanding what is nitya and anitya, even if we can get to that level, that itself is one level of maturity that we would gain, which would help us even as we go through a variety of problems in our life. Even as we recognize each problem when it comes to us, that this is a result of some prarabdha karma, but it is going to go away. So I just have to bear with it. So for us, whenever we face any great situation, whether it is finding a new job or a promotion, or in the family, different birthdays or different milestones, we are so elated. But when we get elated, we completely forget about the fact is, why me? But when we face any sorrows in life, we are immediately struck by this aspect of why me? So the shloka is trying to say that on one hand, recognize what is permanent, what is impermanent, and try to rise above it. But on a much higher level, it is also trying to say that all these experiences that we go through are in the realm of an unreal state. And what is real is that substratum, which is there continuously, which is changeless, and which is there. And that changes substratum is me, is what we will come to. But this is one of the first shlokas, which is laying the foundation for us to graduate now from the state of this anitya, nitya state to now this asat, sat state. So now, having said this, and as again a reminder from where we came from, if you recall, the whole journey started for us where with Arjuna getting into this deluded state and recognizing or telling himself that he's the person who is going to be the person who's going to wipe out the Kaurava army, and feeling bad about it, and the fact that he's going to be killing his teachers and everything, where he takes so much of ownership upon himself as his individual jiva, this teaching starts from that highest level where we started with the shloka number 12, where we saw from the highest knowledge on where Krishna is trying to tell us about what is Atma. So from there on, slowly we are recognizing and trying to see and understand that our real nature is that Atma. So having done this, now Lord Krishna in the next shlokas is going to help us understand what are the characteristics of Atma. What are the characteristics of that consciousness, supreme reality, all the names that we have heard. So let us see what they are. So we'll stand this next shloka. Avinashi tu tad vidhi. Avinashi tu tad vidhi. Yena sarvamidam tatam. Yena sarvamidam tatam. Vinashamavyyasyasya. Vinashyamavyyasyasya. Na kaschit kartumarhati. Na kaschit kartumarhati. Avinashi tu tad vidhi. Yena sarvamidam tatam. Vinashamapyayasyasya. Na kaschit kartumarhati. So Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, this is the first of the characteristics. Understand, Arjuna, that self is avinashi. Avinashi, nashi indicating destructible. So avinashi, that Atma, that Satvastu is indestructible. And what is more? Yena idam sarvam tatam. So it is not only is it avinashi, but it is all pervading. So this, it is pervaded, this entire universe is actually pervaded by this Atma. So the world that we talk about doesn't necessarily have an actual existence. As we saw from the previous shlokas, these experiences which we have with this various objects and relationships and everything, it is only a borrowed existence which exists. So what exists is actually the self, which is the real self, which is the real thing rather. And the world which is now existing is essentially nothing but which is a projection of a distorted mind by agitated mind. In a sense, the world doesn't exist, but the world is there because of this mind which is agitated. So consciousness which is distorted by the agitated mind is really the world. And that is why when you see that when the mind is awake, we see the world. But when I'm in the deep sleep, when the mind is not there, I don't see the world. So it's nothing but a projection of this world. So this distorting medium is actually necessary for us to distort this Atma or truth and project this world. And of course, this world is projected because of the vasanas or the samskaras. So how do I understand this? It sounds very theoretical, correct? So in order to understand this better, I have in the next slide about basically a dream. So this is just to show you a dream where you have something like the Niagara Falls and you have this lady who is walking down here. So just like we find that, when I said the world is essentially a reflected consciousness, or which is the world is pervaded by the consciousness, or we say the world is superimposed on this consciousness. It's like in a dream, you find that Just like, in this, you can see that you can see the magnitude of the falls, which indicates the aspect of space is there. And then you have, in a sense, all the things that happen to us in our day-to-day life. So time, you have a dream time, you have a dream space, and you have all these dream bodies, and you even have a cause and effect. All these things happen in the dream. And we use our mind to go to different places. You can have elephants in your dream. Even though this mind, in Mandukya Upanishad, there's beautiful examples of all this. I'm just bringing one or two of them, indicating that everything, all this in the dream, which you see, actually, you see that really it happens outside too, right? As soon as you wake up from this, you find that the whole thing just disappears. So who really gave the existence, if you think about, to this dreamer and the dream world? Basically, it was an independent observer. The observer is the one who gave an existence to this. If you didn't have the observer, you would not really have a dream, right? So I'm seeing the dream. Now, without me, can there be really a dream? So you have this aspect of an observer who is dreaming something. And how do you say there's an observer? Because when you came out of it, you or I was still there, right? So the dream world was existing only in me. Without me, there wouldn't have been any dream world. So this is the reason I'm bringing this example, is to show how that whole dream world, who was there in it? I myself was there in that entire dream world. I was the one who was literally pervading that whole dream world. The dream objects, they had only a borrowed existence. If I look at myself as existence, that dream world had borrowed existence from me. I was the absolute existence in that case. So even as in this dream, when we see a person who's existing, it is not the person who's really existing. It was me alone who's existing, misunderstood as a person. That absolute existence is misunderstood now as existence of the world. So the same is true for us with this world. What is existing is only that pure consciousness, but because it is a projection of my mind, and this mind basically has all these vasanas or samskaras, you have now this whole world being projected. So this is also evident, for example, when I wake up, I see that ultimately it is only the observer who was there. And I can actually remember a lot of these parts of the dream. So from this is to give you an idea of what is really pervading really means. Having explained the unreal and the real, now this dream example, you can understand what this aspect of sarvagataha or avinash, the sarva, or the all-pervading aspect of Chaitanya or self is. Now let us try to understand this aspect of when, today it's a very catchy thing to say, live in the moment, right? So this also can be understood from this shloka so beautifully, because now think about it. When I am looking out and I see this star, even though the star is far away, where am I really experiencing the star? I'm actually experiencing it right here within myself, right? So this experience is happening in my mind. The mind is the one which is actually projecting something. But where does this mind exist? The mind is only in my consciousness, right? And this is the way when we think about something in the future too, okay, that experience is happening only right within myself. So when we say then, that we are experiencing something, that experience is happening right here. So I, who am experiencing this present moment all the time, is really the truth here. That state of being in that aspect is truly by being in the moment. We are not imagining ourselves anywhere here. We are all the time only here. Okay? And in this moment, we are in this aspect here. And this is really called the state of being. And that is that aham, which is always there. Everything else we see is really the totally an unreal aspect. And that in many ways you can experience, you can tell that is I, that infinite is not anywhere else. I am the infinite, which is everywhere. So this, you can look at it as a way of how I am in the moment. I'm all the time living in the moment only. And in a very, very powerful Vedantic way here. So now, having explained what is Sarvagataha, and we'll be coming to this aspect of Avinashi again in another shloka. That's why I didn't go too much deep into Avinashi in this shloka here. So let's continue on to understand another aspect of this characteristics of this self. And this is to say how this existence is not, or another aspect, we'll see that. Or having explained what was Sat, now we are actually going to see what is Asat. What is that aspect of Asat, which was talked about in shloka number 16. Antavanta ime dehaha. Antavanta ime dehaha. Nitya yukta sharirinaha. Nityas yukta sharirinaha. Anashino aprameyasya. Anashino prameyasya. Tasmadyutyasva bharata. Tasmadyutyasva bharata. Antavanta ime dehaha. Nitya yukta sharirinaha. Anashino prameyasya. Tasmadyutyasva bharata. So, antavanta ime dehaha. Ime dehaha. These bodies, dehaha, indicating all these bodies, they all have an end. Anta, they have an end. So all these physical bodies, which this one, they are perishable. And this is in some sense to indicate the other aspect of which was imperishable, Avinashi. But here, these are perishable, they have to die. So as far as the body is concerned, it is perishable. Interestingly, in Sanskrit, as we know, all these words, they have etymologies. So the word deha comes from actually the word, the root called dih. Dih means that which grows, upachaya, which is growing. And so another way of looking at this word deha is that it can come from another root which is called dah, which burns, or indicating that it is that vastu which is meant to be finally burnt or disposed of. It is supposed to perish. So Lord Krishna is trying to remind Arjuna, if you remember, where Arjuna was worried that he's going to be killing all his relatives and everyone. So this is where Lord Krishna is trying to remind Arjuna that who is he that he's trying to kill? On one hand, if he thinks that he's going to kill that self, but that self is already Avinashi, which we saw in the previous shloka. And now Krishna is trying to remind Arjuna that if he thinks that he's going to kill the body, well, that is perishable. As I give the root for the body, which is perishable. So they're supposed to perish. But then, sharirinaha, that word sharirinaha is the one who is possessing the body. Okay. And in this case, it refers to as the Atma. Okay. The one Atma who is possessing the body. What is the nature? What is its nature? It is Anashi Aprameya. So a word Aprameya has been introduced here. So it is Anashi and Aprameya. So two more new words or two more characteristics for that Atma is being introduced here. So Anashi, Aprameya, and also another word which is Nitya, Nitya or eternal. So the possessor of the body, that is the Atma, that is indestructible, Nitya, and it is Aprameya. Okay, so the bodies themselves, Antavanta ime dehaha, the bodies themselves, they are perishable. So in order to explain what this Aprameya, I think it will be good to understand the different terminologies which is used here, which is, some of you might already know this, but a pramata is a person who is a knower. And prameya is referring to as object. So these are Vedantic words, if you will, to recognize this. A prama means knowledge, and pramanam means an instrument of knowledge. So this is where, we have, for example, if I'm looking at, say, a cup here, then I'm the pramata who's looking at the cup, which is the object, which is prameya. And I get the knowledge that this is a green cup, and that is the prama. Prama is the knowledge of understanding that this is a green cup. And I get this knowledge through my pramanam, which is my eyes here. The reason I mention this is in context of Atma, we now see that prameya, Atma is aprameya. Aprameya indicating that it is not an object that can be seen by any pramanam, by any pramata. And because it is not an object, it is the subject. So it is just like how we would say electricity. If you say electricity, that aspect of the energy itself is electricity, right? And same thing with fire. What is the thing of fire? It is that aspect of the heat. So then for, say, a mirror as a reflecting medium, that the reflection aspect of it is part of the mirror. So all these are aspects of that particular thing. So to Atma, the subject cannot be seen by anything. An example to give for this one could be like how if I have to take a movie with a camera, how do I know that the movie is being taken by the camera? The camera is never there in the movie, right? It is behind it, aspect of it. So it is the subject itself. And that is how best we can understand what aprameya means. So aprameya is that aspect which is, it is not an object, it is the subject itself. So we have seen three more aspects of the characteristics of Atma. If you remember, we talked about how the shlokas 11 to almost 25 or even up to 30, it explains this aspect of Atma and the various characteristics of Atma itself. I see the time is 9:20 now. I was hoping to do two more shlokas, but we will probably do that next week. These are a little more easier shlokas. So I will now go on to the shlokas that we know, the answers. the questions that was asked. So last week, we stopped at this question, which was, none of us have any right to take the life of any person. Now, actually, maybe I'll have to explain this next week, because I wanted to complete the shlokas 18 and 19, which directly addresses this question. No, nahanyamane sharire, this Atma cannot be killed and Atma cannot kill anyone. So in that context, I want to take this up. So I'm sorry, thus, I will come to next week for this question here. Now let us talk about these three questions which was asked. I think it was Menaka who asked this question of, can Atma be considered as the one which is observing the three states? Yes, in some sense, you can definitely consider this Atma is the witness principle, which is our true nature, which is the Sakshi, which is considered as a Sakshi, which observes the three states of the waking, Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti states. So in that sense, Atma is considered as the witness, as the witness. But can it be considered as a conscience? Now, the word conscience is more of a Western usage. In Vedantic language, you could probably look at, we have this aspect of intellect, which is more of a decision-making ability, which basically collects all the information and supplies the right decision to the mind. So in its sense, conscience is that state, is that aspect, is how we would look at it. So Atma would not be considered as a conscience, but Atma is the consciousness that is observing the three states. I hope that is clear. At one point, we'll be going into a little more depth with the BMI diagram. And in that, or we saw the BMI diagram last week also, where you saw that Atma is way above. Atma doesn't have any equipments. So in that sense, Atma cannot be the conscience in that sense. But Atma, when it takes on the identity as an intellect, in that sense, maybe you can consider that as a conscience. But Atma by itself is only Sakshi, it is an observer of the three states. There is a question here. Thank you. The difference between soul and spirit. Now, the word soul in Vedantic language would be looked upon more as a Sukshma Sharira. Sukshma Sharira, again, this is an aspect when we come to the third and fourth chapter, we will discuss more on this. But in a sense, we look at ourselves in the form of three Shariras. One is the gross body, which is made of the 5 elements, and that is the Stula Sharira, or the gross body. And it is a gross body which really, dies and which goes back to the earth. But it is the soul, or the Sukshma Sharira, which carries the mind and the intellect, and also our, we call this as Vasana, or our personality, if you will, from one body to another. So that would be how I would look at soul. Soul is actually the Sukshma Sharira, or the subtle body. And the spirit, you could look at it, and spirit has been also talked about in Vedanta more as the Atma. So that would be the difference between soul and spirit. Soul is the Sukshma Sharira, the spirit is the Atma. And they both are very different. Atma is totally independent. As we talked about, Atma is Nityaha, it is Sat Vastu, it is Aprameya, it is Avinashi, all that. Whereas soul is also Anashi, it is perishable. Once that particular Sukshma Sharira attains moksha, then there is no Sukshma Sharira at that point. It goes back to its independent elements. The soul, Sukshma Sharira, subtle body, which is mind and intellect, is also made of the 5 elements in its subtle form, and they all go back to the elements. So, and then is soul and Atma same? I guess is now, I think I explained that. So soul and Atma is a spirit and soul is a Sukshma Sharira, and I think I explained that. So the first question, we will take it up again when we finish the 18th and 19th shloka. If there was any aspect of today's which was not clear, please do send me a question or any comment. I would be happy to take it up. I know there are 1 or 2 aspects which I wanted to go a little more deeper into it, and I may not have clarified that very well. But if there is, please do let me know. Thank you. Hari Om. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.